great. Let's jump right in. I'm going to be talking about speech levels in Javanese, and this is a conference of Austronesianists, but speech levels are weird, and are kind of a peculiar thing about certain court-centered areas in Java. So, one of which is Jogjakarta, which is where the data that I'm citing for today's talk mostly comes from the sort of aristocratic traditional speakers of these varieties of Javanese that have these speech level systems. Okay, so what are these speech levels? We can sort Javanese utterances into one of three levels. This is sort of the traditional and actually correct view that there's three levels that any utterance basically belongs to. They're called in Javanese ngoko, kromo, and modyo. Kromo means is the high level, modyo is like this middle level, and ngoko is the low level. The choice between these speech levels is basically determined by three main factors. So the low level ngoko is canonically used for low status addressees, historically at least sort of non-aristocratic addressees, who are not older than the speaker and with whom the speaker has some kind of an intimate relationship. The kromo, or the high speech level, is by contrast canonically used for addressees with high status who are older than the speaker and with whom the speaker has a non-intimate relationship. And then the so-called madyo level, which sort of sits between these two, is what Wolf and Pujo Sudarmo refer to as a halfway house between these two sort of endpoints. And it's canonically used in situations where the factors that determine the choice of ngoko or kromo are in some kind of conflict. And there's lots of interesting discussion, for example, in Wolf and Pujo Sudarmo and in Klein's 1989, who I'll also be citing in a moment, about how exactly different speakers use the madyo level and when they use it versus the other two. And I'm not going to get into any of that. And in fact, I'm not going to talk about any of this anymore today. So let's go on. What I'm going to be talking about instead is the sort of formal properties that allow one to, generally speaking, unambiguously assign any utterance of Javanese into one of these three levels. And again, when I say of Javanese, I understand that I'm talking about these sort of varieties that are traditionally spoken, for example, in Jogjakarta by the aristocracy. Okay, and this determination can be done purely on a formal basis. So the example I'm going to discuss is here in one. It means Ms. CT has already eaten that one. And the sentence, three sentences that have exactly this meaning are given and are in order of kromo, madyo, and ngoko. And the fact that the first one is kromo and the second is madyo and the third is ngoko is encoded through a choice between otherwise synonymous lexical alternates, okay, whose only difference is their compatibility or incompatibility with particular speech levels. So to see how this works, and this discussion is based on that of Klein's 1989. So let's first look at the kromo versus ngoko levels. So the blue alternates are the ones that are compatible with kromo, but not with ngoko. And the red alternates are those that are compatible with ngoko speech level, but not with kromo. All right. And you can see that in this 6-word sentence, 4 of the words, and when I say 6 words, I mean one of them is a proper name and the other is a title of address. But anyway, the 4 main words in this sentence all have this, belong to these sort of alternate sets. Okay. Now the madyo level is characterized on the one hand by a mixture of ngoko forms and kromo forms. So you can see, for example, in this sentence that the word for eat on the madyo level uses the kromo verb nado, okay, but the relativizer, that the thing in Malay would be yang, is the ngoko form sing, okay. So that's one of the features of the madyo level, is that it exhibits mixture of chromo and ngoko forms. But it also exhibits some forms that are only compatible with the module level. So those are in yellow and underlined here. So the word for already, the variant mpun, or the variant of the word for that, niku, are sort of unambiguously mark this sentence as being in the module speech level. Similarly, some of the ngoko forms are only compatible with ngoko. So in particular, the verb eat, mangan, or the word wis, which means like sudah, like already, and the word for that, kui, okay? And there's other words or other alternates that are only compatible with the chromo speech level, okay? So that's how this is encoded. So words like sampun can only be used in chromo speech level. Words like nadal can be used in both the chromo level and that intermediate module level. Words like mpun can only be used in the module level. Words like sing can be used in either the low ngoko level or, again, that intermediate module level. And finally, words like wis can only be used in the ngoko level. And any word that participates in this system of lexical alternates can be placed into one of these 5 lexical classes. Formally, we can encode this distinction in terms of plus and minus n and k features, where n sort of, points to ngoko and k to chromo. And this is done in sort of the obvious way. It sort of tells you which level, maybe it's not so obvious. Basically, given that module is in some ways characterized by a mixture of ngoko and chromo levels, you can think of the module as being simultaneously plus ngoko and plus chromo. Whereas the chromo level is plus chromo but minus ngoko, and the wis level is plus ngoko and minus chromo. And so the distribution of these words in those, their compatibility with these levels can be sort of encoded with these features. All right. So linking the lexical classes and the speech levels, like I said, the speech levels are signaled by by the features that are encoded by the lexical items chosen for an utterance. So the chromo speech level is signaled by minus n plus k, module by plus n plus k, ngoko by plus n minus k. Now there's a combinatoric constraint on the choice of lexical items on any given utterance. Given that an utterance has to belong to one of these 3 levels, a single utterance cannot contain simultaneously a plus n and a minus n lexical item, and nor can it contain both a plus k and a minus k lexical item. Okay. So let's sort of look at this again with our example. Like I said, I sort of have examples from our of our 5 different lexical classes here. So starting with the with sampun, which is minus n plus k, that feature structure makes it compatible with the chromo speech level, but not the other 2. By contrast, the verb for eat, nodal, is plus k, but it doesn't specify anything about n. That makes it compatible with the chromo level and also the module level, but not the ngoko level. Mpun, which is plus n plus k, ends up being compatible only with the module level, all right? Because the chromo level is defined as a level that cannot contain plus n items, and vice versa for ngoko. Sing, which is marked as plus n, is then compatible with ngoko speech level and the module level. Wis only with the ngoko level. All right. Now, okay, so far so good. Now, if you think about this in terms of paradigms of lexical alternates, what you end up with is a paradigm, which I'll call here paradigm 1, which is characterized by the choice of the word for already. So you have the choice sampun, mpun, and wis. And what you end up with is a paradigm that looks like this table here, where each of those 3 lexical items is only compatible with one of the 3 speech levels. Okay, so that's paradigm 1. That's also, that characterizes the situation with the word for that. The second kind of paradigm you can see from this discussion is what I'll call paradigm 2. That's a paradigm where you have only two lexical alternates, one of which is compatible with both the Chromo speech level and the Madyo speech level, the other of which is only compatible with the Ngoko speech level. And then finally, you have what I'll call paradigm 3, and it's sort of the mirror image of paradigm 2. It's a situation where you have two lexical alternates for the same meaning, one of which is only compatible with the Chromo speech level, and the other of which is compatible both with the Ngoko and the Madyo speech levels. Okay, so far so good, I hope. Now, this basically, sorry it's kind of quick, but this characterizes what I'll call the categorical properties of the speech level system. When I say that these are categorical, so it's theoretically categorical, but it's also empirically categorical. People who have a command of the speech level system will reject as in a kind of black or white way as unacceptable forms that mix the lexical items in a single utterance in ways that violate these restrictions that I've laid out here. Okay, so it's categorical in that sense. But it's often been observed in the literature that the Madyo level in particular, remember that middle level between low Ngoko and high Chromo, is somehow a continuum. I'll cite the two people that whose data I'm mostly working from. So Klein says, in the intermediate Madyo style, the degree of relative formality or distance is directly dependent on the relative proportions of Ngoko and Chromo items used. So remember that one of the things that characterizes the Madyo level is that certain Ngoko and Chromo items can be mixed together on that level. And so what Kleins is suggesting here is that you can have more Chromo-like Madyo utterances or more Ngoko-like Madyo utterances as a function of how many Ngoko versus Chromo lexical items you've put into your utterance. Okay. Similarly, Wolf and Pujo Sudarmo says that what's written here, Madyo is not a set of fixed forms, but it's rather a cline rising from a level very close to Ngoko up to a level very close to Chromo. The height of the M level depends on the mixture of these two forms. The greater the percentage of Ngoko forms, the lower the Madyo level. By the way, you'll notice that this quotation here transcribes Madyo and so on differently than Klein's does, and that's one of the fun things about working on Javanese, and it's going to be imported into the data that I take from Wolf and Pujo Sudarmo. Okay, all right. So continuous properties of the Madyo level. Here's what you get, the intuition you get from what we just read. Speech levels are categorically determined, but the Madyo level allows for both plus K and plus N lexical items, of which there are many, something like 500 each. The Madyo speech level utterances sit on a more Chromo-like to more Ngoko-like continuum, and the analytic intuition that we just saw is that the position of a particular Madyo level utterance along this continuum is at least partly a function of the proportion of plus K to plus N lexical items. So the rest of this talk, I'm going to sort of suggest that simple intuition isn't actually right. And I'll show you why. So an overview of the data. The data I'm going to be talking about in the rest of the talk is from Wolf and Pujo Sudarmo. And the data has the following character. First, they recorded this large corpus of Javanese dialogues, and then they had native speakers assign the utterances in that corpus to one of the three speech levels, which is a categorical judgment. They also had them assign the Madyo level utterances into one of three sub-levels. It's low, mid, and high. Yeah, they present the results of this in some tables in their book. And the data that they give there is going to form the basis for the rest of this talk. So here's just a quote from them. What you can see from reading this is that the categorization into Chromo, Madyo, and Ngoko levels was basically, you had close to 100% inter-rater agreement. But the categorization into the sub-levels of module was not consistent across speakers. And that's, not surprising because it's not something that's really encoded in the grammar. It's some kind of a feeling for how relatively ngoko-like versus chromo-like the utterance was. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind, that the judgments here on sub-levels of module are kind of squishy. All right, so looking at those three paradigms I just showed you from that example sentence, here's what the data in Wolf and, I'm going to say W and P, here's what the data look like. So what you can see here is that what I'm showing, the way to read these graphs is the white areas are show which of the speech levels a particular lexical item was found to occur in. And the black areas, the non-colored areas, are speech levels where that lexical item was not found in the corpus, okay? So what you can see is that, in the module level in particular, there's no difference between the distribution of the items from these three different, types of paradigm. What does that tell us? That tells us the following: that in particular, if you look at the words for who and the relativizer, the word for who that is compatible with the module level is plus k, and the relativizer that's compatible with the module level is plus n. And if the overall ngoko-ness or chromo-ness of an utterance was determined by just counting up how many plus k items you had and comparing that to how many plus n items you had, you'd expect that if you just happen to want to use a sentence with a relativizer in it, you'd end up kind of forcing your utterance to be a little bit more ngoko-like, and vice versa for a sentence that has who in it. But that just seems not to be correct empirically, and which is good because it would be kind of a perverse situation, I think. In order to, so what's going on? Well, it turns out there's a lot of other kinds of paradigms that you can find. So here's that paradigm 2 that I showed you. There's another kind of paradigm, I'll call paradigm 4, which is like paradigm 2, except you've added a module specific form to the paradigm, okay? So here the words meaning how, there's 3 alternates. And what you can see is that the plus k form is compatible with the module level in terms of, based on its features. And so is the plus n plus k form. And then the way to read this table is the gray boxes with X's in them are showing places where you would have expected, based on the features that these words bear, that it should be compatible with that sub-level of module, but where the data suggest it's not found there. So basically, this pattern here is showing what you expect, namely that the plus k form seems to indicate a higher type of module level, whereas the plus n plus k form is sort of indicating a slightly more ngoko-like module level. All right. There's some variation in the patterns that's given here. I'll skip over that. Now, paradigm 5 is exactly the same thing, but sort of in the other direction. So go back again to paradigm 3. You can see that so let me say that again. Paradigm 5 is just like paradigm 3, except again, you've added a module form, a plus n plus k form. This time, the plus n plus k form is competing with the plus n form in the module level. And the pattern that is reported by Wolf and Pujo Sudarmo for these type of items is illustrated here. You can see that just the plus n form seems not to appear in the high module level, whereas the plus n plus k form doesn't appear in the low module level. For some reason, they don't report the middle level, so that I have some question marks there. Okay. There's another kind of paradigm where you have that's here, but let me briefly say this paradigm is one where you have you have 3 forms and they're all compatible with the module level. And there's actually only one lexical item that exemplifies this one set of lexical items that exemplifies this paradigm, and I've given it here. But what you can see is, again, that the competition, insofar as we can see it, it trends in the right direction. The plus k form seems to indicate a higher level of module, whereas the 2 plus n forms seem to indicate lower levels, okay? All right. So there's an interim summary of what our different paradigms look like in terms of what the feature structures. I'm going to skip that. Um, Now, the types of the paradigms I've given you, there's something like maybe 80 or so, 90 or so items that fit into one of those paradigms, which leave something like 1,000 items that don't. And so the rest of the items all fit into another paradigm that I call paradigm zero. Um, and it looks like this. So this is a case where you have two lexical items, one of which is plus k and the other of which is plus n. And what that causes is a competition in the module level. There's no module form. This is uh, exemplified here by the word for house and the word for child. So what you can see here again is that here the plus k form is competing with the plus n form. And there seems to be this split again in the module level where the plus k form is sort of pushing you to a higher type of module and the plus n form is pushing towards a lower form of module. But the only reason that happens is because there's a choice to be made in the module speech level. Okay, the when you have pairs of words like that, there's some difference in patterns here, like basically where the cut is between, is it where the cut on the module level is, does it fall between low and mid or mid and high? But given that these judgments are kind of flaky anyway, I wouldn't make much of that. So my time is up, so I'm going to stop here, but I have some diachronic speculations that are in the slides if you're curious, but I'm going to jump to the conclusions so I can finish talking. So the paradigms I've discussed here cover most, if not all, of the patterns that are found in the data of Wolf and Pujo Sudarmo. There's a handful of cases that present complications, and I'm going to discuss these in more detail in the paper. So, go read it. The current, as of the late 20th century, speech level system is fundamentally categorical in nature, but most alternate sets actually give rise to a choice in the module level that's not categorically determined. The choice in those cases, since there's competition, gives rise to this intuition about the utterance being more ngoko-like or more chromo-like. Like I said, there's some diachronic speculations that are in the slides, but I don't have time to go over right now, so I think I'm going to stop. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Great talk. So please raise your hands or just unmute yourselves if you'd like to ask questions. We have about 5 minutes.
Okay.
Tamisha?
Yeah, that was very interesting. Thank you. I have a question about maybe the diachronic stuff that you skipped over. In particular, I'm interested to know whether it's like we commonly find amelioration or pejoration. Like, what is the direction of change for certain lexical items? Do they become more high register or low register over time?
Okay, great. So this is speculative, so I'll take this opportunity to show you the slide. So the basic speculation is this. So hopefully you caught, I know that was fast and there was too much information for the talk, for the 20 minutes. But anyway, the vast majority of the lexical alternate sets are of the following kind. Namely, you have a chromo form and a ngoko form, both of which are compatible with the module level. So you have a two-way contrast. One is plus k, one is plus n. That gives you the module level. Okay, so the diachronic story is basically this, the speculation. That basically originally all you had was that type of paradigm. All you had was alternates that were exhibited this two-way contrast. One is plus k, one is plus n, and all the other paradigms I sort of described came about by kind of a reanalysis because of the competition. So I can sort of show you what it looks like. So imagine you start with something like this. And actually, this is the most common pattern according to Wolf and Pujo Sudarmo. Like, according to them, this is like what the vast majority of the alternate sets look like. And you'll notice that there's kind of a bias towards the plus K form taking over the mojo level based on, again, if you just take this data at face value. So the idea would be then that you would sort of, that bias would kind of shift over and kind of become categorical, and then you'd reanalyze it so that you're like, oh, I see, the local form isn't actually compatible with the with anything chromo-like. So you kind of knock it out of the mojo level and you kind of reanalyze it like that. So the other pattern, I suggest that the other direction also happens, so that you see what I mean, like that the chromo form ends up becoming purely chromo and the local form kind of takes over the mojo level. But in answer to your question, I don't have strong evidence for this, but my hunch is that in fact this is the more common pattern and this is the less common pattern. I think actually the numbers bear that out, but I have to do some better data digging and put it in the paper. So I'll try to answer your question when I write the paper. Okay. Thanks.
Great. We have 2 more minutes. Josina, would you like to ask?
Yeah. Does Wolf and Pujo Sudarmo talk about chromo andap or chromo ingil, which are humbling for those either humble sets of vocabulary or deferential sets, higher sets of vocabulary, and they can also occur in ngoko.
Right. So I didn't mention that. I should have been asked about this, but let me clear that up. So by the way, the chart here, that word deferential, that lexical class differential, refers to both, like the union of the chromo ingil and the chromo andap forms. Okay. The basic answer to your question is this. They discuss it, but here's the analysis you can extract from what they and also Klein say. Basically, so some of the lexical alternate sets have an addition. So for example, the one for eat, and let's just use an example, and then I can answer concretely. So the verbs I gave here, there's 2 alternate thing for nada and mangan. So there's this third alternate for eat, dahar, I think is the verb, which is so-called chromo ingil, high chromo. Despite the name, it doesn't have anything to do with the chromo speech level. That verb dahar is completely compatible with any of these speech levels. You need to have a sentence where you have a third person who's eating, okay? So Mr. So-and-so ate already, so the addressee doesn't come into it. What dahar does then is it somehow indicates deference towards or honorification of the subject or the eater. And so in other words, it works like argument honorifics in a language like Japanese and Korean, and it's completely orthogonal to the speech level system, which is like the politeness systems in languages like Japanese and Korean. What's kind of peculiar about Javanese is that the way of indicating object or like argument-oriented honorification, you're trying to honor or express deference towards someone that you're that's referred to, but some referent in the sentence. Japanese and Korean sort of separate those systems out so you can do both simultaneously on the same word. But the Javanese system purely works through like lexical suppletion. So you kind of have to make this choice. But when you make that choice, it doesn't like lower the chromo level or anything like that. So basically the choice is orthogonal. I should have mentioned it, but that's the answer. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I think it's time to move on to our next talk.
Thank you. Sorry that I went over time.